When it comes to reseeding, we feel that skipping a year is not really an option. The fact that we reseed this year puts us in a far better position for next year and the year after.
Today, I'm on the farm of Tom and Helen O'Connell in Inniscarra, just outside Cork City, for one of the Teagasc Grass10 reseeding events. We're also joined by John Maher, head of the Grass10 programme, to discuss the need for reseeding, which is why the events are taking place, and to hear how Tom and farm manager Dan O'Mahony approach reseeding. I started by asking John to talk about the amount of reseeding that is happening each year.
Yeah, it's a big concern for the industry, Stuart, yeah. We've had some difficult springs. We go back to, 23, 24. They brought their own challenges with weather. 25 was good, and then things are running late this year as well. The downside is that, unfortunately, we are behind on where we need to be in terms of reseeding. The national stats don't make great reading. I suppose we're now in a different era as well. We have bigger demand in the autumn and the spring now with cows, the way they calve and the level of performance that they do. Our nitrogen allowances in terms of fertilizer are more restricted, so we know the reseeds give the highest response, grow the most grass into shoulders, and give us a massive opportunity to get clover into the farm. And when you start doing less reseeding across the industry, well, then these things start to become a greater problem. The other thing that the data has shown over the years is that while the fertilizer allowances are coming down, and the amount of chemical fertilizer in terms of nitrogen less has been spread, what's happened is that there is more imported feed coming in. If you can get a reseed into your farm and into a cycle, you will grow more grass and at more critical times.
So, John, I suppose Tom is nearly the exact opposite of what you're saying here in terms of the amount of reseeding that he's doing. So we've obviously been working with Tom for a good number of years through the Dairy Gold programme, and Tom, you've been doing a lot of reseeding, and you've actually done everything that John has been outlining there, but we'll say you haven't necessarily upped the feeding to compensate for it. So as in, you've reduced your level of nitrogen used, but you're using your reseeding to keep driving on your grass growth and so forth. So just explain to us your motivation for reseeding all the time. And we'll say you're doing you've 10% done on the grazing platform, or you've some of the 10% that you plan to do done on the grazing platform. You're also reseeding silage ground today as well. Some people don't reseed their silage ground at all, not to mind do 10%. What's the motivation, and I suppose the big concern, and I'll come back to you in a second, John, about it as well in terms of the costs, is a lot of people are thinking of putting this off for 2026 because milk prices dropped. What's your mindset in the whole getting the job done and the actual cost associated with it then?
Yeah, Stuart. I suppose the way we're looking at it now, it's the cost is one important factor, I suppose. But when it comes to reseeding, we feel that skipping a year is not really an option. That basically the fact that we reseed this year puts us in a far better position for next year and the year after. And the repayment or the benefits to reseeding, especially in one sense, especially because of the costs. I mean, if you're going to be paying a contractor to come in to cut the silage, and you've all the land rental costs have gone up and all the other costs have gone up, you need to get the production off of that outside ground and off your farm at home. It's still the cheapest feed, and we can't afford to be buying in unnecessary feed if we are able to grow it. So I think I think it's just one of those costs that you can't afford not to do it, that you kind of have to do it on an ongoing basis.
And I suppose then in terms of the planning to do it, is, again, 2026 is the gift that keeps on giving in terms of challenges maybe up to now. But the spring was challenging, deciding whether to go ahead or not. And I suppose you have the catch of you would be a little bit concerned about a dry spell during the summer as well. So trying to get your reseeding done. Would you consider doing it later in the year, or what's your preference in terms of when to do it? Like we'll say, just factoring in that you do get caught with dry spells during the summer.
I suppose when we're looking at things like pasture base, we can kind of see that pinch points. Okay, while every year is different, there's tends to be a lot of similarities, and I suppose the spring and the autumn are the challenges, and usually from now on we'd be hoping that on average. The space is there to be able to take out some ground for reseeding, and but having said that, now we would like reseeding 10% on a heavily stocked dairy farm, we might prefer to do like 5% first and then step it and do another 5%, maybe do 2 paddocks a year. That's kind of the strategy we've been using now the last number of years, and it seems to be working well for us.
Okay, and I suppose just another point that we've obviously spoken about before is the stocking rate. So you've adjusted your stocking rate a little bit as well. And that probably comes on foot of the reduction in nitrogen, to be fair, in reality, because you were able to grow 100 effectively for a good long period of the summer a couple of years ago when you had a higher nitrogen allowance. But now with that lower allowance, you just can't get to those heights and sustain a prolonged period of growth to actually be at a higher stocking rate. So what are you setting the stocking rate at now for the milking platform? And then when you have the reseeded ground out, what is the stocking rate like then at that stage?
Yeah, no, well, we have reduced our overall milking platform stocking rate, we'll say, for the year, from what used to be 3.55 a couple of years ago down to 3.1 now this year. But I suppose during the peak then, when we have our ground taken out for reseeding, and it kind of maxes out at about being 3.5 to 3.6. And we feel that this is more comfortable, especially, as you say, considering fertilizer restrictions and the kind of weather cycles we tend to have been getting there of recent years. It just seems to be more challenging, so it just works better now in our farm.
And I suppose the big question that we get asked all the time, then Tom, as well, and might be putting you on the spot to answer this one, but like that reduction in stocking rate, now I know it came as a combination of you bought a bit of extra land and then you dropped some numbers as well, so it wasn't all from a drop of numbers, but the impact that had for you from a financial point of view, did you really notice it in terms of the reduction, or did you actually see a benefit in reducing the stocking rate? Because you were possibly dependent on that purchase feed. Again, now the dry spells are probably the driver for that purchase feed on this farm, really, rather than anything else. But have you seen a big benefit from actually reducing the stocking rate slightly?
Yeah, I think we have. Look, we're only after doing it for the last year or two. But what we have seen last year on our farm, we still suffered again from drought. It was dry in this area, and we just found that we got through more of it, easier to manage. It wasn't as big a challenge, and I suppose the other thing that happened was sometimes when you relieve the pressure and you reduce the stocking rate, the animals that are left have a better opportunity, and they produce, like we ended up sending in more milk with less cows. So I suppose from a profit point of view, that can't be a bad thing if the same volume of milk or more goes in with a few less cows.
Very good. So, John, just run through a few figures there, because, as I said, people are concerned about the low milk price in 2026 and they're putting off this. And Tom is saying, no, whatever happens now, we will do this. We'll do our 10 to 11% every year, regardless of the situation, because, and it's a very interesting point that reseeding in 2026 helps to reseed in 2027 effectively. And I, as I said to you earlier or yesterday evening, one of the advisors put it to a person yesterday: if you don't reseed in 2026, are you going to do 20% in 2027 if milk price is better? So I suppose address the costs piece of it and the likelihood of doing 20% if we're not doing 10%.
You're not going to do 20% anyway. We all know that. But Tom's point about the payback and the cycle is very, very important here. So just to give you the bigger picture here for a minute first, when we look at the numbers, and there's just straightforward numbers in terms of yield, just extra grass grown, right? You have your money back in 2 years. But that doesn't include that the extra grass grown is coming in the spring and the autumn, particularly the spring, which is what Tom is referring to, and we'll come back to that in a sec. It doesn't refer to the extra cow performance, that the animals perform better. Everybody knows the cows perform better, but it's never put into the numbers. And the other piece then is that, people will say to you, one of the reasons they don't want to reseed is the spring is run late and they're worried about drought. But we know that the reseeds are the first to they're the first to come out of drought and the last to stop going into a drought. And in terms of response to fertilizer during a drought, they're the best. So, those figures are not included. But we go back to Tom's point is that, the fact that Tom reseeds every spring, and we know that the extra grass production in reseeds, a lot of it comes in the first part of the year. That extra grass production has given him the capacity or space to reseed in the following year. And that's the point. And if you miss that cycle, well, then the mountain just becomes much harder to to climb. So doing it every year just makes sense. And go back to your point, if you miss it this year, you're going to receive 20% next year. It just becomes too big. And what happens then is it doesn't get done. The productive capacity of the farm, or the capability of the farm to grow grass, reduces, and the circle just gets vicious and gets more and more vicious. So, I know the year's been difficult. I accept the costs have gone up. The payback is big, the payback is quick, the return is high, and for many farmers, they don't actually see the return until it's after it's done. So that's part of the challenge we have to deal with. That's why we have a focus on reseeding, and to continue it even with difficult circumstances, to keep the farm moving forward, which is fundamentally what we're trying to do here.
So Tom, just before I ask John the question, just the soil fertility on this farm here is quite good, and the soil fertility of the paddock that you've actually reseeded here today, just give us a bit of background on that.
Yeah, most of the farm is in either index 3 or index 4 for both P and K, and the line requirement is we've soil tested there recently, so they're all okay for the pH as well. And similarly with the paddock that we've just reseeded, it's index 4, strong index 4 for P and for K, and the pH was also good. Was it 6.7?
Yeah, I was just going to cut in there, like good is a very kind of a multiple feast. Maybe they're kind of like a 6.7 is where we want people to be, and you're reseeding a field that's already at 6.7. Like so, John, I suppose the devil's advocate question here is: people that have poor soil fertility, should they actually be reseeding, or should they go after the soil fertility piece first?
Well, they should go after both, Stuart. But okay, the argument is fix the soil fertility first and then reseed. But I'd make the argument for both, because you get the opportunity to do both. The lime one is just a no-brainer for everybody. If you bring up the pH, you trap more nitrogen, and you release P and K out of the soil that you need to grow the tons of grass that we need to grow. So I just think there's an opportunity here. If the field is underperforming because of soil fertility, okay, there's an argument then to fix that first. However, if the field is underperforming in terms of growth of the spring, and as in Tom's case here, the quality of the sward is not where he wants it to be, even though the ryegrass content is not bad in it, but the quality of it is not where he wants it to be, then we have an opportunity to bring in, new grasses. The pasture performance index has identified grasses now that are much higher in pasture quality, and in particular much better in terms of grass utilization. So there's opportunity here to get a win on production, a win on quality, a win on graze out, and fix the soil fertility. So there's a financial cost with it, but anything to do with terms of grass, be it soil fertility, liming, reseeding, grazing infrastructure, the return is high, and the return is quick, because grass is the mainstay of the diet for most herds in the country, and like we know Tom's is particularly good. So once you have grass in the diet, the costs in terms of feeding animal and spreading slurry, reduced dramatically. It's an opportunity you can't forego, really.
Okay, so Tom, you're actually trying a bit of an experiment, I suppose, for us in a way this year with that. You've no P allowance, so you're doing reseeding without P. That's going to be a concern for people. Is it a concern for you yourself?
Yeah, sure. I suppose it is, Stuart. But look, we'll just have to see how we go. I suppose we'll have to look at what options are there for us. Like as we go along, we'll see how we get on.
But you have a good P allowance, as you said already there, index 4, good P status on that field that you've reseeded at index 4, and a very, very good pH, just to emphasise that again, at 6.7, which David Wall will say is unlocking any P that is there, so it should be available. But I suppose what we are going to do, which is thanks for facilitating us, is we're going to follow your progress on this paddock over the next number of weeks and months to see how it performs. I suppose, John, if we take it on another bit then, just while we are talking about what's going to be done over the next while. So if the field was rolled this morning, it was sown there the other day, so we got to see a lovely seed bed, an excellent, superb seed bed, to be fair. But the next steps now, so it'll start to peek through probably, Tom, after the rain over the next couple of days. So someday next week you'll you'll start to see that beginning to come through. What will be the next steps? What should be the next steps, Dan? Then?
Yeah, just to follow up on the pea allowance. So the field was ploughed, so the risk here now is that we're turning down the P's and K's. Right now, we can, the standard procedure for reseeding is 3 bags of 10, 10, 20 per acre applied. So Tom can fix the nitrogen by going with nitrogen, and he can fix the K by going with Mura potash, which I might add every farmer should have in the yard, because it's just straight K, no nitrogen, no P's, and you have total flexibility with this product in terms of spreading throughout the year. So the nitrogen will go out, the K will go out. The reseeding is done at a brilliant time. There's an inch of rain forecasted for this area tomorrow. It's getting a great chance to establish. And, while there's no P going out, you have all other things right. pH, nitrogen and phosphorus, superb seed bed. It's getting a great, great chance, right? Despite not having a P allowance and despite ploughing down index 4. But we're going to follow this, and the soil sample has been also taken to see what way the plough ground will turn up. But generally we know that when you plough, while you might plough down index 4, you generally don't plough up index 4. So anyway, but we have to follow this, and we're going to follow it through the year. There has been some work done in Moore Park between Fiona Beamish, I suppose, William Burchell and Michael Egan, looking at no P allowance on index 4 soils in a damp spring. And, Moore Park's a very kind soil, and look, the index are high index 4. So, and what they saw there, applying 0P, 12 units of P, 24 units of P, even with and without slurry, there was no difference in grass yield, grass establishment, clover establishment. But again, kind seedbed, kind farm, and superb indexes. Yeah.
Okay, so I suppose taking it on the next step, then Tom, gone in today. When are you going to be spraying it? You obviously have the spray got, I presume, already. And when will you graze it? Then approximately, obviously, we don't know to the date, but what's your thinking about it?
Yeah, look, it is this time of year. It is weather dependent, depending on rain. But look, I suppose the first promising thing is that it looks likely it is going to get rain off very soon after setting it. All things we'll be looking at it from 4 weeks onwards, with a view to spraying it as early as we possibly can. Again, to keep to get at the weeds before they pass out, to become too strong for the herbicide to work. Look, and I suppose that's the big thing, that our clover is strong enough, and that our weeds are not gone too strong. It's the tricky bit, the balancing act there, but usually it's somewhere around 4 or 5 weeks we'll be looking at it, and we'll be watching it from there on.
Okay, and then the grazing piece then after that, obviously the spraying date dictates your grazing date depending on what product you're using.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it varies between 1 week and 2 weeks depending on which product. But after spraying, before we can graze it. But yeah, we'd be hoping to get into it with a cover of around 1,000 anyway for the first 2 or 3 grazings, to try and get it to tiller and to set it up for the year.
Very good. So how important is that, John? I think it's just something that's just missing completely commercially.
Oh, it's missing completely, yeah. What happened, most of the seeds we see are all delayed. The spraying is delayed, which means the grazing is delayed, which means that the clover doesn't get a chance to establish properly. It also means that the grass plant doesn't get established properly in terms of tillering. And when you don't get tillering, then you don't get competition against the weed grasses. So the timing of the first grazing and the spraying is crucial. Like 90% of the money spent once we've everything sown, and the last 10 to 50% gets forgotten, and the whole game can be lost. There can be docks established, we can get wheat grasses in if we don't get the spraying management and the grazing management right. And what Tom has outlined is where we need to be. But what generally happens is the spray gets delayed for whatever reasons that is. Sometimes it's weather related, sometimes it's just the opportunity is just missed, and then you have to wait, and then you end up grazing a cover of, Tom wants to graze 1,000. It's not unusual for me to see 2,000s being grazed, and then the weeds have a grip on you, be it the grass weeds or the other weeds, and then you're fighting the battle a hunt away, and it's not easy win. Now, the more we graze, generally, the more competitive the ryegrass will be, the more competitive the sward will be, and they have the ability then, with the right management, to outgun the weeds, with the exception of docks, but particularly to outgun the weed grasses. Yeah, so that grazing pieces and herbicide timing is vital to get right, to get your money back.
Okay, so Tom, you made two very interesting comments today during the walk. The first one was that cycle of reseeding that John has mentioned there as well, that reseeding basically reseeding this year allows you to reseed next year. And the other one was that you're not very good at spraying weeds in between reseeding cycles. But I actually say that that's a positive, because it means that you're doing everything right around the post-emergence, etc., etc. So your timing, so you go and look at a sward on week 4, and you see that it's nearly ready. You're making a phone call then straight away to say, the next good day, basically, we're going to spray this. You have the spray in stock, and then obviously that spraying date then dictates your grazing, but you're grazing at a low cover repeatedly for 2 or 3 grazings. Like, you're not expecting to get 3 grazings out of this paddock because I've reseeded it. You're not expecting to get that from it for 2 or 3 rounds, maybe. It is out into July probably now before you'll be expecting to get full grazings off that. But how important is it that you're only picking off your days inside in that field to how it actually establishes in your mind? Like,
well, we find it very important, Stuart, yeah, because to tiller it and to keep the quality right in the sward. And it's not as if you're not getting production from it either, because when the cows will go in even at the cover of 1,000, they'll go in there and they'll hoover that up, and they always there might be 1 grazing, as you say, in a 3 grazing paddock, but they'll go in and they'll just love it, and they'll eat it down to the board, and it'll give the grass a great chance to tiller. It'll keep as John pointed out, it'll keep the weeds down, and you just end up with a thicker, better sward every time the cows go into it. So the second round is going to be better than the first round, and it's kind of a cycle, really, you know. And getting back to the point you were saying there about being able to, cyclical, or being able to reseeding one year benefiting you and helping you to be able to reseed the next year, became very obvious to us this year on this farm, because we reseeded 2 paddocks last year now, and they're near the parlour, and those 2 paddocks now this year so far, they were grazed early. They were grazed in February. And they were shooting ahead there in March. They were growing when nothing else was growing, and there was a cover back on 1,000 in them in about the 20th of March. So we were happy with. They gave us the confidence then, and we have them, and they're currently growing very well, and they're kind of allowing us now, if you like, to increase our stocking rate and to be able to confidently take out our fields for reseeding. Whereas if we didn't have them, the whole system would be just under that little bit more pressure, and it'd be harder actually to go and to reseed this year. So I think that's an important point, that you can kind of, if you can manage to do it one year, it'll be actually easier to do it next year afterwards, because you'll have the reseeds there to kind of last year and the year before is reseeding. You get a kind of a boost out of them that will help your whole farm, your grass growth, and will help you to be able to pull out paddocks and to reseed again the following year.
Okay, I suppose the other thing, Tom, as well, is that you split your reseeding, so you're going to do the 10%. Explain the kind of the way you manage that as well, because I suppose you've experienced in the past, maybe taking out the whole lot puts you under pressure.
Yeah, look, I suppose back along when the farm was at a higher stocking rate on the milking platform, we made maybe what we felt afterwards was a mistake anyway, of taking out maybe a whole 10% or slightly more than it in one go, and ended up with a bit of a drought situation. And we just felt that year that it put the pinch on the grass for the cows for just too long. So since that year, we've taken the policy that we will take out 1 paddock and early, and that's not going to put us under too much pressure. And we'll once that once that gets green, and generally with the last number of years, I suppose it's when that's kind of almost in the wedge, when we're doing our grass walk, that we feel confident we'll go away and we'll take out the second one. And we kind of said, if you had a very bad drought year, you might get the second one done, but every year we actually have got the second one done. But we just find it evens out our grass and takes the pressure off from a stocking rate point of view. But this year now we probably will go into the second paddock that little bit quicker, because our milking platform stocking rate is a bit lighter, so we feel that we probably can chance going off a bit sooner, especially now if this paddock that we've done today, if that gets the rain now and if it starts coming up next week, we'll be considering going into the second one. All right.
Very good. So, John, I'll leave you with the last word. Sum it all up. Tom has outlined textbook management effectively in terms of how to go about reseeding and making it work for him. What's the best? What's the three key things for people to take away?
Yeah, okay. Good question. Anyway, the first thing, I know it sounds strange, but Tom had this planned out, right? And he's outlined that very, very well. What he's going to do, when he's going to do it, how he's going to do it, right? And when that's all lined up, it's the first start of the battle, and you're already halfway there. All right, I suppose I have to go to the next one, Stuart, which is the reason we're holding a lot of these events. The whole seed bed preparation, getting things right in terms of establishment, for whatever reasons, are not going well. We see that across the country. It's not unusual for me to get queries and asked to view reseeds and salvage them, for want of better, or correct them or try and fix them after they've gone wrong. And a lot of it relates back to the seed bed. And there are three things then that come up in that, really, that there's too much being asked the farm, and Tom's done a good explanation of how to handle that. What I mean by too much asked the farm, I need to get the reseeding done, I need to get it done fast, I need to do this, and this, and it just doesn't go right. The next thing is there's too much being asked of the glyphosate product, that, I spray it this week so I can go reseeding next week. We just know that with the way the glyphosates work, the higher the growth, the better they work. To get that chemical from the leaf down to the root of the most difficult weeds, so we'll say scotch and particularly docks, is minimum 2 weeks, if not 3 weeks, right? And then there's too much being asked of machines, so we've a spread off to 2 weeks, and then the machines are asked to come in and work miracles on a sod that's just not ready. So the timing, the planning, that's the planning first, the whole seed bed preparation piece next, and the last piece, Stuart, because a lot of other stuff gets done fairly well, to be fair, is it's seeded, all done, rolled, all done well, gate closed, probably 85% of the cost done, and the last 10 or 15% just goes wrong in terms of first grazing, or the application of the herbicide. It gets missed, and you've done all the work well, but the docks come back, the weeds get established, the wheat grasses get established, mainly because you've either mistimed the spraying for the weeds, or mistimed the grazing that Tom has alluded to very, very well. So they're my 3 quick messages, if that's all right.
Okay, thank you, John, and thank you, Tom, and thanks for hosting us here today for the event as well. That's all for this week's episode of The Dairy Age, and my thanks to John for joining me. Special thanks to Tom for his time in recording this podcast, as well as the time he, his family and staff have afforded us ahead of the event today and other events he has hosted for us through the years. Indeed, we would like to thank all the farmers that have and are hosting events for us across the year. We greatly appreciate you opening up your farms and giving us your time. Check out the Grass10 newsletter for other reseeding events that are taking place around the country. So that's it for this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Stuart Childs, and join us next time for your Dairy Age.